is awesome.
Good to see you. Hi, Barbara, I'm expecting this. Hey, how are you? You guys want to put some logs on those lapels or trail logs?
Yeah. We're all scarred by the same noise.
How are you? I'm Rob Rose. Are you a reporter? Oh, perfect. What about?
Yes, awesome. We also report from the Express. So, awesome.
Whatever it is,
Yeah, Chris is buying all the papers, I guess. Yeah.
it sounds like you're keeping up. Oh, you got 4 million people over here, 2 million people over here. They're not gonna know your same stuff. Thanks for your vision.
As long as I don't like people off, sure.
I travel a lot, so I'm living in the papers. And I'm recording this, we're going to see the product.
We'll see the same.
We're good there.
Yeah.
All right, nice. Thanks, your couple.
Good morning. My name is Dan Cooprider. I'm the father of Christopher Cooprider. Y'all know our attorney, or Mr. Michael Watts, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about my son, explain a little bit about the background and how we arrived here. So this goes back a little bit, taking you back to when we were a little younger. That's my wife, my daughter, Grant, Seth, and of course Christopher, the eldest. I think we also take you back a little further. That was the day that he was born, and my life changed. And I think any parent will tell you that the first born child makes a life-changing difference. That's where we were over in Germany. We was playing soccer for the local Nuremberg football club. Developed an athletic ability at a very young age. He was a standout athlete throughout all of his high school and then college career. He won this championship. It's contributed to UNCW, North Carolina Wilmington Tennis Championship, several years, and one of the most outstanding performer at the conference championship at least a couple of times. And then, following in his grandfather's footsteps, his grandfather was a battle veteran of the Battle of Okinawa in World War II. Christopher decided that he would, like his grandfather, join the Marine Corps. And he decided that he would do his grandfather one up and become an aviator. So about 4 years ago, coming up on 5, I guess, he did that during COVID. It was a grueling process to get into that program, the aviation program. That first photo is his primary drill instructor, gunning sergeant at OCS, Officer Candidate School, on graduation, saluting his newly graduated officer, an officer in Marines. That's Christopher in his dress blues. Couldn't have been more proud of him. Until today. I'm prouder of him now than I was then. So that's me. Best photo I ever took. That's Christopher. And at this point, I'd like to ask Captain Cooprider to step up and make his statement. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to say I have one thing to say today, and that is that I absolutely did not do any of the allegations that were filed against me in the suit. And for anybody who knows me personally, you know that these allegations are absolutely not something that I do. It's not my character, and it's not who I am. I look forward to working with Mr. Watts and my team and clearing my name going forward. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Michael Watts. I am proud to represent Captain Chris Cooprider for free in this lawsuit. About 28 days ago, I was speaking to a crowd of young lawyers in Colorado. One of the things that I said was there's nothing more powerful than a bar card looks good. The next morning, one of those lawyers who happened to be a friend of the Cooprider family called me and said, "Did you just say that for a fact, or did you?" And of course, I said I meant it. She says, "Are you a man who's a good person, who is in trouble with Corpus Christi, and he did not do this? I know this family, they're good people, and I want you to help them." And so my first question was pretty obvious. Petition reads pretty ugly. Did you do it? I wanted to know that before I put myself and my reputation on the line. And what I learned is from the day that they filed this lawsuit on August the 11th until the day before I answered it on September the 3rd, they went on a media smear campaign unlike anything I've ever seen. If you Google Marine abortion pill between the dates of the date of filing on August the 11th and the day before we filed our answer on September the 3rd, you will get 4,320 hits on Google. The lawyer who filed this case apparently decided that it was okay to try his case in paper before a United States Marine could even answer. I'm here on behalf of my client, Chris Cooprider, to answer those allegations, to ferociously deny them as the junk that they are. And I'm going to explain to you why that's true today. With respect to what we've got to talk about, I've got 10 things I want to bring up, and we'll go through them one by one. But the person who is making this allegation has to be looked at, and this is a person who made repetitive threats to Captain Cooprider. Before she ever even met him in December of 2024, we swept the Corpus Christi Police Department records for how many times they had been called to her house. There were over 20 different calls to the police from Ms. Davis's home at the location where she lives. Had nothing to do with Chris Cooprider before he even met him. Next, we stripped some records and we found that there had been a police report for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, where she was facing 20 years in prison, where her own husband filed a police report that she tried to poison him, said she drugged him. And as she told Mr. Cooprider, now somebody could come to my door, Mirandize me, and I could get charged for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. And lightning has indeed struck twice. Poison is the theme of the day, or false poisoning is the more accurate theme of the day. Now, it didn't start with the monster that my client has been made out to be in this one-sided media barrage. It started with a 36-year-old woman meeting a young captain who happened to live next door. And these are the notes that she wrote about how she was feeling. She said, first and foremost, you're in an incredibly vulnerable position right now. She wrote, you rightfully have post-traumatic stress disorder, adjustment disorder, with depression and anxiety, and it's not your fault. And I agree with her. It's not her fault. She hadn't dated or spent time with another man in that way many years. And she, in her words, said that Chris seemed like an incredibly nice, respectful, and rare guy, educated, with a great career, attractive, articulate, single. But when they first became an item, he made it clear to her that he would be moving on, as most people in the military would, to continue his flight training in North Carolina. She wrote to herself not to be pessimistic, but if something is too good to be true, it probably is, and he's moving to North Carolina in May. The fact that he's telling me now is much better than leading me on. But yes, it still sucks. That was the beginning when, in her eyes, Chris Cooprider was an incredibly nice, respectful, rare guy who happened to be leaving the state of Texas in May of 2025. Quickly after their relationship began, an ever-increasing avalanche of harassing phone calls from Davis to Cooprider began, and it scared him. This is phone records off of his phone for a single day that shows well more than 50 phone calls in a single day. She told a neighbor she had called him 53 times on another day. Repetitive badgering, harassment, scared him. She announced that she was pregnant, and then she announced that she was bleeding profusely, was not pregnant. And then she immediately got pregnant. 3 more occasions of announcing that she's bleeding, miscarrying before April the 5th of 2025. These threats started back in March. There's an audio that is in the materials that we'll give you on a thumb drive when you're done, where she's literally at his front door screaming at him, threatening to file a police report, and telling him that I'm no stranger to CCPD. It was that quote that caused me to strip the records of how many times people have been called to her house. They knew her well. They knew her ability to, in effect, claim things that were not true. On March the 28th, she told Mr. Cooprider, one of their offices has been abusing the shit out of me for 2 months and making my life hell. She had her own problems with the police. On March the 29th, I'll ask you one more time, and then I will communicate exclusively with the judge advocates moving forward, threatening his career in the United States military. And of course, on April the 5th, she's interviewed that night after she claims this event that made the basis of this lawsuit happen. There are witnesses in the hospital when they ask her whether she wants to press charges. The characterization from her children's lawyer is that Miss Davis lit up. But before she left the hospital, she was heard to ask, do you think that with these charges, Chris will have to stay? Do you think that with these charges, Chris will have to stay? This is the man she thought wonderfully of, that she knew was leaving in May, charges in April. Do you think with these charges that Chris will have to stay? She claimed that she had been severely bleeding on 4 separate occasions in the 6 weeks prior to the date in question. On February the 23rd, 2025, she told Cooprider that she was bleeding profusely when she was not. On March the 5th of 2025, she told Cooprider, who reported this in a wellness check to the police officer who was concerned, that she said she was expelling the aborted baby right now. On March the 25th, they discussed the fact, contractions, pains, bleeding. And then finally on April the 5th, she claims that she's bleeding, that she's gushing blood, but nobody sees what she claims for the 4th time in 6 weeks. Third, the way this crime is alleged doesn't make any sense. It makes an upright, well-raised young athlete who's serving his country in the United States Marines into the dumbest criminal ever, if this story is somehow to be believed. And it also calls into question why she does the things she does immediately preceding the alleged event. For example, the truth is made obvious by what I'll call the 3 T's. Protects. She texts Cooprider after the event. She claims to have, in an event where they were supposed to both turn their cameras off and have a night of trust, she slipped her recorder into a purse that was placed immediately adjacent to her hot chocolate, inches away by chance. And it's recording the event. She records 29 seconds that purports to show a spoon shaking. And we'll get to that in a second. This was set up to be recorded to turn in before it ever happened, according to our answer on page 27, paragraph 74. Time, the second T. Her allegations are that inside of 5 seconds in that 29-second recorder that somehow Mr. Cooprider slipped 10 different abortion pills into her hot chocolate. What she didn't know, and what I know from doing pharmaceutical drug litigation, is that all medicines have to be tested for certain characteristics. This medicine is no different. There are dissolution tests, because when we ingest something into our body, we need to know how long it takes the cover or the coating to break down before the drug is delivered into your bloodstream. And the problem that this lawyer and his client have is the dissolution date for this drug shows that it is impossible for 10 separate pills to break down into anything that wouldn't have choked her, have been noticed as clumpy, have been tasted with a bitter taste that she would have immediately seen. So the third T is taste. She wants people to believe that he slipped 10 pills into her hot cocoa, she drank it all enough to abort a child, but didn't even notice it. But the taste of this particular drug is purposely very bitter. 10 of them, still in clumps, is even more so. There is no way in God's green earth that somebody ingests a cup full of 10 pills of this and does not know that it's happening, doesn't immediately recognize it. And yet she has no explanation for the fact that she didn't even know it was in there. And the fact is, it was never in there, especially by Mr. Cooprider. Fourth, this has been investigated. We in the state of Texas take crimes and allegations of crimes very seriously. We've always well-funded our investigatory bodies. The Corpus Christi Police Department is no different. But the unfortunate part for this lawsuit is before the Corpus Christi Police Department made its official determination, Mr. Justin Mitchell, a very bright, very in his own mind well-intentioned crusader for a political point of view, and I don't fault him for that. He had already taken on Ms. Davis as a client on May the 25th. And I know that because Mr. Cooprider received what's called a preservation letter. And this is in your packets as well. And so by May the 25th, Mr. Mitchell somehow has been put in touch with Ms. Davis. How did that happen? Well, Mr. Mitchell does a bunch of legal work for the Right to Life East Texas Incorporated, a gentleman by the name of Mark Lee Dixon. Mark Lee Dixon loves Facebook. Mark Lee Dixon chronicles for his acolytes, for his fans, what he's doing in the name of unborn children, and good for him. But we know where he was and when he was on particular dates because of his own words on Facebook. He says that I learned about this individual in May. After hearing about this case from a local pregnancy center director, I knew that Leanna Davis had to be connected with my attorney. So we know that he was down in Corpus Christi in May, met a local pregnancy coordinator. Her name is Jana Pinson. She's the executive director of Pregnancy Center at the Coastal Bend, a very nice lady. And this whole thing gets into motion. May the 22nd. That's the way the lawyer who's filed this lawsuit for Leanna Davis was brought together with. Now, one problem. He sends out a letter on the 25th of May. 3 days later, the Corpus Christi Police Department puts out a press release talking about how we assigned a detective to the case who examined all the evidence. And I mean all the evidence. The results of the probe were shared with the Nueces County District Attorney's Office, and it declined to bring criminal charges. And the quote from the press release was, after careful review, both agencies concluded that the elements of a crime could not be established and that the investigation was subsequently closed as, quote, unfounded, close quote. Unfounded means it had no basis, it wasn't true, because it wasn't. Did they stop there? Well, no. They started haranguing the local investigatory authorities, demanding that they pursue the case. They contacted the Nueces County District Attorney, and they started suggesting that this case was not being prosecuted by a liberal district attorney in a South Texas county that perhaps does not share the ideology with the legislature on this issue. The problem is that Nueces County is now a Republican county with a Republican county judge, a majority of Republican commissioners, and most importantly, a Republican district attorney who has to run for re-election and is on record as being pro-life, but he's also pro-truth. And he looked at the evidence and he made the right decision based on what the facts showed, not what the ideology wanted. Did that stop it? No. We know that Mitchell was informed about it because my client, before he was my client, actually texted him, said the false accusation made against me were officially dismissed today by the Corpus Christi DA. They were declared unfounded. Have a good day. That should have been the end of it. The timeline of this lawsuit, however, reeks with political motivation. And so it's very important that we set up the timetable of what happened and when to answer the question of why we're here. If we go through the timeline, she presses charges with the Corpus Christi Police Department on April the 5th. Immediately, she lit up. She meets with Mark Davis, or Pinson did, one of the two, around May the 22nd. By May the 25th, Mitchell writes a preservation letter saying he's Davis's lawyer. On May the 29th, he's advised by my client that the accusations have been dropped as unfounded. They go into hibernation, complete and total silence for 74 days. I was asked yesterday, well, is that unusual? Why you're investigating the case? I said, no, but it's when the sleeping bear came out of hibernation that's interesting. August the 11th. A day which will live in infamy if you care about the truth. What happened on August the 11th? My client was woken up by a Washington Post reporter who emailed him at either 5:53 or 7:53, depends on which time zone he was in, I forgot to ask him, and asked for his comment about the lawsuit that is going to be filed against him. He doesn't know anything about it. About 8:30 in the morning, this lawsuit is filed, and look who happens to be in Corpus Christi. Mark Lee Dixon posts on his Facebook page, another wrongful death lawsuit has been filed, as if it just magically happened. What else happened on August the 11th? A young man who has never been in trouble, who has an excellent family, who's always treated women with respect, who has served his country with honor, and is just trying to get his wings, wakes up to the horror show, which is Texas grudge match politics on wedge issues like abortion. In one day, he is the subject of the Texas woman sues Marine, claiming he spiked her drink with abortion pill article on NBC News. A publication called The Texan runs with it. The Independent, Raw Story, The Federalist. These are right-wing blogs that I didn't even know existed until somehow, miraculously, they instantaneously become Woodward and Bernstein and know about this lawsuit before anybody else. Yahoo News finally picks it up, and they realize they've got a problem. What happens also on August the 11th, after this barrage of media? There happens to be a Senate hearing on Senate Bill 6, the abortion medication bill that is being considered in the first legislative session. Just so happens, I'm sure it's a coincidence. 10 a.m., lawsuit's filed at 8:30, mind you. The hearing starts at 10 a.m. We'll get to that, what's said. But somehow, somebody got from Corpus Christi, which takes about 3.5 hours to get to Austin, with the news that a lawsuit had been filed at Corpus Christi, in time to testify about it at a 10 a.m. hearing. On August the 12th, the pummeling The public lynching by media, the stoning of this man in the town square continues via onslaught from the Dallas Morning News, the Washington Post, the Texas Scorecard, which delivers real news for real Texans. Axios. YouTube TV has it. The legal commentator talks about this lawsuit, how it's going to go, because all they have is this nonsense that is published in this lawsuit. It even appeared in what's called the Mirror. Now, I actually had to look this up because I live here in Texas and I don't know of the Mirror. But what I learned was the Mirror is a publication. This article is written by some guy named Leon, who doesn't know how to spell Corpus Christi. And Liam, who misspells Corpus Christi, turns out he's all the way over in England. So this is getting worldwide treatment. Now, I can see why the lawyer and the crowd that was pushing this wanted it to work in the legislature. But they distribute it across the world for fundraising purposes, I assume. I think if we really looked, in addition to the Mirror over in England, they're trying to get the message out. I bet they did it in Cancun and in Greece and wherever else Ted Cruz goes on vacation. The point is, this was a worldwide effort to smear an individual for legislative advocacy purposes. Their problem was is they went after the Corpus Christi Police Department, who was having none of it. Dixon is still in Corpus Christi on August the 12th, the day after the lawsuit is filing, and he's selling the soap that the PD should reopen the investigation. He says on Facebook that the NBC News reported yesterday the Corpus Christi Police Department said there are no active investigations involving Cooprider. And he says they named the child Baby Joy. We'll talk about that later when that happened. Corpus Christi Police Department, what more evidence do you need to arrest Christopher Cooprider for the murder of Baby Joy? News outlets are called, conservative media outlets are called to put pressure on the Corpus Christi Police Department. And the Corpus Christi Police Department responds as follows. And I've never seen this before in 35 years of practicing law. They put out a statement: the Corpus Christi Police Department stands by the results of its investigation and is confident that any honest and objective third-party review would reach a similar conclusion. I talked to a reporter yesterday who said this is the first time in her career that a police department has invited a publication to issue a Freedom of Information Act request to get out what's in those files against this nonsense that's being sold. Do they stop? No. They continue to press Houston Chronicle, San Antonio Express News, Austin American Statesman, KENS 5, and the Texas Law Report. This onslaught continues until August 22 for a reason. By then, Senate Bill 6 is in the House as House Bill 7, and we have a House State Affairs Committee where the same two folks show up pushing for a prosecution of my client, as if that's their job. And sometime, either today or shortly from now, Governor Greg Abbott will sign that bill into law. I am not here with a political message for or against that bill. That's not my job. But I will tell you, if that bill passed based on this story, it's a bill built on lies. It never happened. And they used him for political expediency. So, number 6, this lawsuit was filed to advance Texas abortion medication bills. Full stop. August the 11th, it's filed at 8:20. By 10 o'clock, an hour and 40 minutes later, it takes 3.5 hours to get from Corpus to Austin. The Corpus Christi Coastal Bend Pregnancy Executive Director is in hearing, testifying. Just this morning, a lawsuit was filed for wrongful death where a military guy got the next door neighbor pregnant. Somehow she knew. The guy she met back in May was still in Corpus, badgering the police department to reopen the investigation. She's in Austin extolling the virtues of the charges against Chris that weren't. And the same day that bill passes out of the Senate, Senate Bill 6 becomes the bill that's sent to the House, and the first legislative session ends. Governor Abbott immediately calls a second legislative session. Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, gets involved, starts sending out cease and desist letters to different folks in different places. And that's his job, if he wants to do that. But he's quoting this story to send these things, and that's fine. By the 15th, Greg Abbott calls a second special session. One of the things on the call is legislation further protecting unborn children and their mothers from the harm of abortion. And so we've got everybody back. The second special session starts, and we start again. Mark Lee Dixon, now August the 22nd, is testifying in front of the House State Affairs Committee with respect to the same bills during the second special session. On Friday morning, I testified on Representative Jeff Leach's House Bill 7, the Women and Child Protection Act. The bill would dramatically change when it becomes the problem of abortion-inducing drugs being mailed into our state. Now, part of the reason I'm here is the threats that have been made against this young man by Davis's lawyer, by the people commenting on this, that because an Oasis County District Attorney's Office will not pursue these fallacious claims, the Attorney General of the state of Texas is going to come rescue the situation and indict him anyway. I'm here with a message to Ken Paxton. If you care about the facts, you will do no such thing. This case is not only defensible, it is demonstrably false and would be a giant waste of state of Texas time. Ken Paxton, somebody with whom I have worked carefully and closely, and I want to give him some kudos for his work in the Texas opioid litigation. Just 2 days ago, he announced our most recent settlement, adding another $45.5 million to the $3.35 billion his office and the lawyers he was working with, including myself, achieved for the state of Texas. I'm very proud of that. I think Attorney General Paxton has done a good job in that regard. But just because he's running for Senate against John Cornyn, and just because there's a race to the right in a Republican primary does not mean a United States Marine should be sacrificed on the altar of political efficiency. It would be wrong morally. There's nothing Christian about indicting an innocent young man who's serving his country in the name of protecting life. It's wrong. He cites these cases. He is badgered by these two witnesses. He's challenged to issue the indictment. Dixon puts out on Facebook, the CCPD said there's no active investigations. What more evidence do you need? He said that back in May. By August the 22nd, this is the testimony that the House State Affairs Committee got from the very nice lady that managed to get from Corpus to Austin in an hour and 40 minutes. I know our Attorney General was running for something else, but wouldn't he prosecute them? He confirms that Paxton met with Davis last week, maybe about mid-August, right before that cease and desist letter went out. So hopefully they will prosecute it and override the people with the file in the Oasis County DA's office, the Corpus Christi Police Department. So it's possible that this still gets the criminal prosecution, and there's an active Senate case. Look, I'll start this the way I began. If the evidence actually showed that Cooprider in fact poisoned her and caused her miscarriage, I'd be all for prosecuting her. But that's not the evidence. That's a fiction. It's a political calculation. Because the facts reveal that anti-abortion pill political advocates have falsely pursued him for political reasons, maliciously pursued for political reasons. Attorney General Paxton should do what he didn't know he wanted to do the right thing. Let Chris Cooprider continue to serve the country in the United States Marine. Let Chris Cooprider continue with his life without political prosecution initiated for political reasons. And there's another reason. Because the truth is, he didn't do it. It's absolutely demonstrable, and I haven't even started discovering it. Let me explain what some of that evidence is. But before we get to that evidence, I'm a little concerned about something that my friend Jonathan Mitchell brought this lawsuit. And I think he's a nice young man. I think he's gifted. I think he's smart. And I think he is wired to try to make a difference on this issue. And I don't blame him. But he is not entitled to bring lawsuits based on falsehoods. Our rules, our court rules, do not allow that. But this man who brought a civil lawsuit was quoted yesterday. The Cooprider is guilty of sin, will be held to account for what he did, both in the civil suit and in the upcoming criminal proceedings. How is it that a solo practitioner can predict for us the upcoming criminal proceedings? He knows the Corpus Christi Police Department says this is nonsense. He knows the Nueces County District Attorney's Office refuses to prosecute. Something else is afoot here. And it's not the way the government of the state of Texas ought to be run if this is in fact happening. So what were the most likely causes of the loss of her unborn children? Let's start with the statistics. About 9 to 17 first trimester pregnancies end in miscarriage, sadly. That's for people who are in their 20s. By the time you were 36, that rate has doubled to over 20%. So before anything about her conduct and her activities begins, the mere fact that she is pregnant at the age of 37 or about to be 37 makes her have double the probability over a normal healthy woman to have a first trimester miscarriage. The data is clear. But there are 7 other things that she did that explain why this baby is no longer with her. First, number 1 rule of pregnancy is don't drink. She violated court orders not to drink around her children. They had been taken away from her. She was drunk while taking care of her kids. It's documented in the investigatory notes that we received. She continued her heavy drinking while pregnant, as witnessed by my clients and others, her next door neighbor. We got texts where she tells Cooprider she wants to booze. She drank alcohol that night with her hot chocolate. And yet the CDC and the health authorities in this country and in this state all say there's no known safe amount of alcohol during pregnancy. Full stop. And that's because the risk of miscarriage rises 8% per week while you drink when pregnant. This pregnancy, if you look at the science, probably terminated at about 8 weeks, which means she increased her risk of miscarriage by 64% by her prolific, consistent, heavy drinking with a little baby inside. Second, she did not follow her doctor's orders. There was a spontaneous message sent by what we call an ultrasound. Normally you get the ultrasound and see the size of the baby, but also measure something called embryonic heart rate, EHR. And the ultrasound that she had revealed an abnormally low EHR. The baby was in distress with a low heartbeat. A low EHR up to 6.1 weeks means that you have a first trimester termination rate of 56%. On March the 21st, to try to counteract that, her doctor prescribed a drug called progesterone. It's commonly given to pregnant mothers with babies with a low embryonic heart rate. By March the 22nd, she says, if progesterone levels don't change by Monday, it's likely the baby may have stopped growing. She knew the baby was in distress. She knew she had to take progesterone. There were 7 studies published by the NIH that show a clear positive association with miscarriage when progesterone is not utilized. She knew all this, and yet she wrote on April the 4th that she had stopped taking progesterone a week ago. An inexcusable choice, given the science, that put her baby in distress. She even asked Cooprider, now that you know that I stopped taking progesterone a week ago, do you think I should be worried? Yeah. In addition, she had a sexually transmitted disease for which I am not here to criticize her. But that led to intestinal infections that put this baby in distress. She was diagnosed with chlamydia on March the 24th. She took a megadose of what's called a zithromycin, Z-Pak. The science about taking a Z-Pak during pregnancy is clear. Don't do it, because it increases the risk of spontaneous abortion by 65%. On March the 29th, in addition, she tested positive for Salmonella typhi. What is that? Salmonella typhi is what leads to typhoid fever. She had been presenting with fevers for about 10 days, over 100 degrees. She was sick from typhoid fever. Typhoid fever, these fevers, triple the risk of miscarriage in the first trimester because she failed to get it under control. And there are article after article after article talk about enteric fevers, intestinal fevers during pregnancy can result in miscarriage of about 65 to 80%. The data is overwhelming. In addition, she consumed things. It was her choice whether to consume them that increased her risk of miscarriage. She was taking codeine during pregnancy when its black box says this may increase the risk of miscarriage. She used benzodiazepines during pregnancy, which the science shows doubles the risk of miscarriage with a 2.39 relative risk. She was on Zoloft, which more than doubles the risk of miscarriage with a 2.09 relative risk. She consumed huge amounts of Red Bull, the energy drink. Red Bull has massive amounts of caffeine. Caffeine more than doubles the risk of first trimester miscarriage, 2.23 relative risk. But her simultaneous use, her combination use of codeine, benzodiazepine, Zoloft, Red Bull, created a multiplying effect of risk to this baby and the risk for a first trimester spontaneous abortion. She was seen performing high activities, jumping on a trampoline, landing on her stomach, riding outdoor attractions at an outdoor carnival in the Corpus Christi humidity, high impact activities for 10 to 40 minutes a day, almost quintuple your risk of a first trimester spontaneous abortion in a statistically significant manner. So what was the result of all this? On April the 4th, the day before the alleged crime, we can see in her own text messages what the consequence was. She experienced severe cramping in both her lower back and in the front, which is classic symptomology for a miscarriage. There is advice, medical direction about what you do when you experience that kind of cramping. Number one, you get out of the heat. Number two, you go to an ER where it's air conditioned and you can get treatment for that baby. She's telling him at 3:53, I'm having bad cramping now, both in my lower back and in the front. At 4:05, I'm scared from miscarrying in public. At 4:50, my sister thinks I need to take the kids and go to the ER. I'm trying not to panic. But she didn't go to the ER. She decided to stay at this carnival. After her sister told her at 4:50, in her words, your kids will much prefer a baby bro or sis over a carnival. Priorities. But she stayed. Mayo Clinic, one of our country's finest hospitals, says when you have cramping in the pelvic area or lower back, a woman should immediately call her pregnancy care team right away. The baby's in trouble because maternal exposure to ambient high temperature significantly increases the risk of spontaneous abortion. And then finally, sometimes, 20% of the time when you're 36, spontaneous abortions just happen. It happens to good people every day. She had a misguided view that having sex would be an effective method to shake things loose. She asked for unprotected sex under the belief that sperm has a prostaglandin that would help initiate a miscarriage. She suggested that the baby stop growing at a certain point. that she's going to miscarry, hence the low heart rate. She even said that the doctors didn't schedule her next OB appointment yet because they're not sure the pregnancy is even viable yet. She said, I don't want to be alone at the next ultrasound because I don't want to see an unmoving baby by myself. I feel even less optimistic about his chances. Regarding the child's viability, on March the 28th, she says it's a big if. If the baby continues to survive, and if I decide to keep it. These are in her texts. On the 4th, she texts that she is still mostly indifferent to expelling. She just doesn't want to be in public. So all that is in the text records, without a single deposition having been taken. So what happens on the 5th? There's an evening of trust. The phones are supposed to be off. A recording device is surreptitiously placed in the purse. It's put right next to a cup of hot chocolate. And we're really to believe that a Marine came in and put 10 abortion pills in hot chocolate. It doesn't make sense. That dog won't hunt. It's not the truth. It is a scurrilous allegation for political reasons. When she starts accusing Chris via text, Chris says, "You're the only person with abortion pills in the house." She says, "Well, I never took them." And they're in evidence with the CCPD. So all of the evidence the CCPD looked at, she chose to give them. And they called nonsense on it. Unfounded. Number 9. When you sue somebody, you give up your right to privacy. That somebody has a right to defend themselves and seek the truth. And today that process starts. Today we are issuing subpoenas to her half sister with whom she was communicating, to any lab test now whom we believe did blood tests during and at the end of her pregnancy, to Dr. Christine Canterbury to get her medical records, OBGYN records. They're going to show all this. They're in the text. Corpus Christi Bay Area Medical Center, where she went that evening to get their records of what was said. We've got 2 witnesses that were in the room. We already know that things not adding up. The records will show it as well. Corpus Christi Women's Clinic to get those records. CVS Pharmacy, show which drugs she had pharmacy prescriptions for. Devin Davis to get her communications about what was going on with those that she loved. Mark Lee Dixon. I want to be real clear. I don't have any evidence that Jonathan Mitchell is in the midst of a conspiracy to help these people make up a plan. But I'm going to find if it exists. What I think probably is more likely is this very fine young lawyer puts himself out as the guy that sues to stop abortion, was only shown half the cards of the deck. I think the facts were concealed from him. I think perhaps he failed to do the investigation that now wishes he had done before he filed this lawsuit and published it 4,320 times on the internet, for which there are legal consequences that we'll discuss later. Melissa Madrigal. The relationship between her and her husband was so toxic that the judges became concerned for the well-being of her 3 kids and appointed them their own lawyer to figure out what was in their best interests. That lawyer is a former judge named Melissa Madrigal who investigated this. We'll subpoena her notes to figure out just what she learned. We've issued a subpoena to Meta to get all the social media accounts. This woman deleted things, whitewashed things, got rid of things repeatedly. But there's a digital record of it all that we know how to get from the social media providers, and we'll get it. We'll get the records from the Pregnancy Center of Coastal Bend, see who she talked to, when she talked to, what she said. To a friend of hers named Casey Pyle, with whom we'll get records with respect to STD tests. The next door neighbor, Jackie Sanderson, who we know what she's going to say. She's already been talked to. She She told Chris, don't go back to that house. She's going to accuse you of something. She took videos, she took recordings of this wild behavior by the plaintiff that is before you. We'll get Davis's phone numbers. Her texts that she's deleted are still in the Verizon records. They've been subpoenaed. Kyle Yakupovich, it's supposed to be Yvonne Yakupovich. We'll get those photos, videos, things that she texted to recreate the information she's destroyed. And we will send Freedom of Information Act requests to both the Corpus Christi Police Department and the Nueces County District Attorney's Office to get their records. This discovery is not going to be pretty for this lawsuit. The texts are already screaming fraud. Those are the subpoenas that today will be issued in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Texas, Corpus Christi. Let's let the chips fall where they may. I'm confident that we know what's going to happen. But why are we really here today? I want to give you one closing thought about it. We're really here today because Chris Cooprider has been publicly flayed. He's had his reputation skin torn off by a lawyer and advocates for this position. He didn't deserve it. He's been publicly stoned by media, accusing him of murder in order to advance a political agenda to get legislation passed. If a United States Marine can be reputationally burned at the stake like this, which Texan is next? If you can't protect a Marine from these kinds of allegations, how is your average Texan going to defend himself? Texas's new law strips all sorts of defenses typically available to victims of frivolous lawsuits. There's no ability to get attorney's fees when this happens to you. They want to make it easy to file these lawsuits. Facts be damned. But there are tools available when this happens, and we have invoked those tools in the form of our counterclaim. You are not allowed to publicly assassinate somebody with fraudulent allegations. That comes with legal consequences for which we seek damages in our counterclaim. This counterclaim for $1.1 billion seeks only justice. It's not about making these guys rich. I made a deal with him the first day that he called. I said, I'm going to find out when you did it. I'll let you know in a week whether I'm going to represent you. At the end of that week, I was certain that I was representing an innocent man. And I said, I'll represent you for free, but you're not going to turn this into money either. And so we made a pact. I'm working for free. He's agreed to donate anything collected from this lawsuit to the Wounded Warriors Project, so that nobody can argue this is about money. It's not about money. It's about truth, or the absence of it, in a political assassination that occurred for political reasons. And finally, if you don't have these counterclaims, and you don't get punitive damages for publicly assassinating a man's character for something he did not do, how are we going to stop fraud from people bringing lawsuits under this law? The people who were against the law called it snitches to riches. And I don't want to take a position on that. That's not why I'm here. But you must have the ability to allow people to protect themselves from people making up claims like this. Lastly, closing thought. Just yesterday, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy, a good Catholic against abortion in his soul, came out and said, well, the FDA rule that permits the distribution of these abortion medications via the mail was based on studies that twisted the data. And his problem is his boss is already on record, says he's not going to do anything to ban mail order abortion medication. So there's a long history in your materials of how the FDA got to where it got, and its rule permitting the distribution of these medications. And that can be battled out, but not this way. We had an election less than a year ago. In your materials, 9 pages of statements where people like Jonathan Mitchell, the religious right, challenged candidate Trump then former President Trump, to come out against abortion medication. And he did exactly the opposite. He said he would take no steps to ban it. That's the position of the United States government right now. And it's his prerogative to change it. And that's fine if he decides to change it. But you cannot begin indicting people in state court for what's legal in the United States. And so this is a political process that's fine. But what's not fine is somebody that says this. When President Trump was running for re-election or election a second time, he said, I don't need a federal ban. I've got Comstock on the books. This law that's 90 years old has never been enforced. It's died by legal principles of non-enforcement. And he actually went on the record in front of the New York Times on February the 17th, 2024. And he indicated that anti-abortion strategists had purposely been quiet about their more advanced plans, given the political liability the issue has become for Republicans. He said, I hope he, meaning Trump, doesn't know about the existence of Comstock, because I just don't want him to shoot off his mouth. I think the pro-life groups should keep their mouths shut as much as possible until the election. Close quote. President Trump said one thing for better or for worse and got elected because of it. And now this man is coming in and trying to undo the president's position through litigation against fellow Texans and a fellow Texan from Arizona who's serving his country honorably. That's not okay. As James Schlesinger, former Secretary of the Department of Defense, soon to be Department of War, said 50 years ago, each of us is entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts. And 50 years later, this lawsuit is based on a set of facts that simply will not hold up in court. They are not true. This man is innocent, and he should not be here. I appreciate you all coming. If you have any answering questions. Spit.
Cooprider, so what do you think actually happened with the illicit order previously?
So let me step in here for a second. So I represent him in the civil matter. He's being threatened with criminal prosecution by the Civil Warrior Institute, counsel, who's asked me not to make available questions. I didn't want him to be here to make clear his innocence, but I've been instructed not to. So I apologize. I think that these are questions that are going to have to be entered and discovered. And I think I've got a pretty good idea what happened. That's something we'll say in depositions. Anybody else? Go ahead.
You've been on record in the past as being opposed to most abortions. Is that still your position? Kind of highlight, whether this is political at all for you?
Yeah, this is an uncomfortable situation, right? I've got a political perspective, and I've got a legal job to do. And the political perspective is one that reasonable minds can differ about. When you pull the issue of choice versus right to life, there's reasonable Americans on both sides of that issue. And I happen to be on a different side. That's okay. It's fine. But what I'm here about is that I want to be pro-life and pro-truth. And I don't think it's okay for those also in the pro-life crowd to make up a set of facts to exploit an individual to help yourself. It's just not acceptable use of the system. So my position is still the same. One of my favorite people in the world told me yesterday, I'm pro-choice, but I'm against abortion. I think that's probably where I fall out. I'm not in favor of abortion. I'm not, and I'm not afraid to say it. But at the same time, that's my choice. That's not somebody else's choice. The question we're having right now, the political debate we're having, is whether that's something that they ought to have or not. And let the political process take care of that. We certainly can't do that.
You guys are coming.
Thank you.
Got these well, thumb drives. They have some of the materials in my
Thank you.